Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I'm getting to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What did they do to get started? And what are they doing to stay there? And oh, are you in for a treat today? Because I have another special guest as I'm getting to talk to Kyra Matkovich. She is a principal HR business partner at Exact Sciences. She's also a SHRM influencer. She has a blog called the SHRM-Shenanigans, and she's also known for her infamous coffee shots. We're going to talk all about that. Kyra, I'm so excited to have you on the show. How you doing?
Oh my gosh, Bruce, I'm so excited to be here. I'm just thrilled that really I just love this conversation with you. So podcast is great too, but really I'm so pleased to just connect with you
Yeah,
personally.
absolutely. I would say I always like to start the show on when I first met my guests or when they came into my path. I think we might have met like through the HR community online, maybe
Hmm.
through Twitter or social media. But the first time I remember meeting you was at 2019 SHRM conference. And I remember seeing you thinking, oh my gosh, I finally get to put a face with a name. You were sitting front row and center to Steve Brown's session. Do you remember that?
Well, it doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, 2019 was a little bit of a whirlwind for
Uh,
me for a number of reasons. I do remember meeting you, and because it was shortly thereafter that I think you sent me your book, right?
hmm.
Didn't that get published
Yes.
like that year?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I sent you Find Your Lane and
Yep.
wow. And since then we've become friends and I've watched you and your journey. I've admired you so much
Oh,
and so
sweet.
many of the people that we run around with. I'm sure we're going to be throwing out some names here today.
Maybe a
I want to
few.
I want to ask you though, real quick. I mentioned the infamous coffee shot. I do want to throw that out here front because
Sure.
that's something that I like. As soon as I saw the first time you like showed a picture of your coffee and just had a cool scene, I was like, oh, what a cool picture. And then I started seeing it everywhere. Tell me about that.
So honestly, I don't even remember exactly when that started. By the way, I decided to take ownership over the hashtag HR coffee shop. It is not mine. I don't even know where it came from, but it was kind of floating around the HR community. So it might have been back in, I'm thinking like 2012. There were a few people that were posting coffee shots, and it might have been Steve Brown that was kind of the catalyst for that, as he is for many things HR community related. And I just thought it was really cool. And at the time, I just kind of did it once in a while if there was just something, funny or meaningful in the moment. And it wasn't really until a few years later, I don't know, maybe late, I don't know, 2017, 2018, I don't know, maybe earlier. I have no idea. Anyway, I just started doing it more frequently, and it became less of a just a connection point with the HR community, although that is still a part of it. But for me personally, it is a reminder to myself and to others to slow down, you
Mm,
know,
mm,
look up. Let's get our heads out of our work, out of our devices, out of all the problems of the day, the stress of the day, and just take a moment. And whether that is 30 seconds, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, whatever, just a reminder that, you know what, there's a huge, beautiful world out in front of us. There are amazing people that are a part of this. And it's just a way for me to kind of get in the right mindset for the day. And so that's why I continue to do it.
I got to tell you, I like we just started and I already have chills. So get out your pens, get out your journals. This is going to be a great show. I love that. I actually just sent a note out. I'm working on a project right now called Changing Lanes, and we've all
Mm,
changed lanes many times, but probably more than ever, once we came across the pandemic. And
yeah.
more people have mentioned that they're really focusing more on their well-being, the
Mm,
quiet time, and like
mhm.
what you're talking about, just like getting away. And so I get that. And I got to tell you, every time I see it, I'm like, I think of you. So, our
So great.
our
Well,
good friend
good.
Jennifer McClure always talks about branding. So you
Yeah.
have the HR coffee shop brand. Hey,
Oh, that's
before we
great.
get started, I want you to, I do want people to know a little bit about your company. Like, talk a little bit about Exact Sciences. How do you serve your customers?
Okay, so I will say the draw for me to Exact Sciences, I have a personal history with cancer, lost my dad to cancer, lost my mom to cancer, and that to me was is an immediate draw. It's very important to me that I work for an organization that has a really strong mission. And I don't know of a stronger mission that everybody, I mean, very few people have not been impacted by cancer in some way. To work for an organization whose mission is to eradicate cancer and the suffering that it causes. So that's why I'm here. I would say that's the reason why the vast majority of our people are here at Exact Sciences. As a principal HR business partner, I spend the majority of my time with the senior leaders within the organization. I specifically support our science office, which is research and development, regulatory affairs, clinical affairs. We have biostats, bioinformatics, engineering, software engineering. I mean, there's just a whole gamut, primarily scientists and engineers, although there's some other professionals that are kind of mixed in with that, but it's all science-based. And it's definitely a challenge. It was a learning curve for me to work with an incredible, intelligent, really dedicated group of people. But it's the best job I've ever had. It's the best leadership group that I've ever worked for, the most amazing humans. My role as an HR business partner is I do a lot of leadership development for the leaders, helping them to become better leaders themselves and building leaders underneath them. I'm also a strategic partner to those leaders. You know, we take a look at, well, what are all the different things that are going on in the organization? What are our priorities? What are outside factors that may be influencing these things? And how can we align our people strategies to those overarching priorities in the organization? And I tell you, I know you call it finding your lane. I call it working in my sweet spot. I am in my sweet spot.
Mm.
I cannot emphasize this enough. I love what I do every day. Love it. Love it.
Okay, here's the words I wrote down. I wrote down mission, best, amazing, love. Oh my goodness. I love all of this because I mean, I think that when you find, I don't think it's a myth. They say when you find the work you love, you'll never work a day in your life. I
Yeah.
think it's like finding that space, that sweet spot, like you're talking about. When you find that, it just doesn't feel like work. It just feels like life. And to
Yeah.
have like a mission driven organization, I think we're all looking for that.
Yeah.
And so God, it's just very inspiring for you to like
Yeah. I mean,
hear
it's
that.
definitely it's work. You
Right.
know, what we do when we're working, people are hard. You know, people are broken and messy and beautiful and wonderful and it's all the things and it can be exhausting at times, but I mean, I feel so blessed that I've been doing this a long time and I've worked in
Mm.
some different organizations doing some different, I've done all the HR things from soup to nuts, like all of it. And I will tell you, I am not a recruiter, don't enjoy that at all. Don't like compensation. I don't like FMLA. I don't like workers' comp. I don't like some of those more administrative kind of roles. But being an HR business partner, man,
Mm.
it touches on all the things that I love. I love the leadership development. I love employee relations. I love just working so closely with not just my leaders, but with all of the employees that I have the benefit to work with, and then also the collaboration that's happening with other HR business partners across my organization, as well as other leaders and people across the organization, and really understanding, our business and how the science office is kind of a piece of that larger pie. It's great. I mean, it is work, but it's great work,
I love that.
meaningful
And
work.
it's great work. It's the right work. Hey, I know there's something I know you, I know a little bit about you, but I bet there's a lot of things I don't know about you. I would love for you to share the Kyra Matkovich story. Like, where did you grow up? And how in the world did you get into HR and leadership?
Well, I grew up in Corvallis, Oregon.
Mm.
I am the youngest child of a small family. And when I say small, not just my nuclear family, I have one older sister. But my dad was the only one of his siblings that had children, and my mom was an only child. So no cousins. We do not have a large extended family or anything like that. I mentioned when we were talking earlier, I lost my dad to cancer.
Mm.
I was 8 years old. He was 44. That was something that I think, shaped me really early on. So as I was growing up, things were not super great at home after losing my dad and kind of the effect that it had on my mom. I ended up moving out of the house when I was 16.
Mm.
I moved in with my father's brother, so my uncle, who, by the way, I was very, very close with. He definitely was an influence in my life. A mentor of sorts. Was a great source of wisdom, and I was a really difficult, willful teenager. So I was a handful, and for however, I don't know how, but he was able to manage me from one way or another. And I wasn't really sure exactly what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted something solid in my life. And so I thought, as I was going through high school, I was in music and all these things. And by the way, I won't tell you the whole story because it just makes me cry. But I was offered a music scholarship, which I turned down. And now, kind of as I'm older and wiser, I wish I had done it because, God, by the way, I mean, not only would it have paid for my degree, but I could have had 2 degrees, not just music, could have gone into but whatever. I didn't do that. I did it the hard way. And I thought I was going to go into accounting. I literally took one accounting class. I didn't even finish it. It was so horrible. I'm like, there's no way. Like, could you imagine me as an accountant? Horrible. And then ironically, I went to go work for KPMG, Pete Marwick, at the
Mm.
time, international accounting firm, which, by the way, like further confirmed that I had made the right choice by not going into accounting. But I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, and so I ended up kind of taking a couple of years off. And I worked for KPMG, worked with some different leaders, had some really great people in my life. And as I got older, still early 20s, I realized I really enjoy the public relations and marketing kind of thing. And so KPMG was fantastic. They supported me in going back to school, rearranged my schedule when that was like not a cool thing to do at the time, but they did. They valued me, which I greatly appreciated. And then I ended up graduating with a degree in organizational communication with an emphasis in marketing and public relations. So that was really my intent when I was coming out of school. Well, my first real official professional postgraduate job was working for the American Cancer Society.
Mm.
And there was, even though it was not a specific HR role, there was definitely some duties that were HR-esque as part of it. We were doing a lot of volunteer recruitment, training, different, recognition programs and stuff like that for our volunteers. And then it was a job right after that. I went to go work for a small organization whose the president's wife had gone out on maternity leave. She had just had a baby. And after a few weeks of me being there, I realized, wow, there's some things that are not getting done here, from an HR perspective, because she was the one that always handled that. And so I went to the president of the company who I reported to directly and just said, hey, I see this is a gap and I'd like to take on the opportunity. And
Mm.
what do you think? He's like, go for it. And as I started kind of dipping my toe into the HR stuff, I realized, wow, there's a lot that I need to learn. I didn't know. So then I asked, would you be open to some training and, maybe pursuing certification, which he was. And so that was really my first like official
Mm.
HR type of role. And I haven't looked back since.
That's fantastic. There's so much here, Kyra. Oh my gosh, I have to ask you about the music though. Was that an instrument or was that singing?
It was an instrument. I started on piano. My sister and I
Oh,
both actually when we were probably 3 years old, very, very young. My family is
uh-huh.
pretty musically inclined.
Okay.
And then I took on violin. I want to say, golly, I don't even remember. I was somewhere in the third or fourth grade, maybe.
The
And I
violin.
excelled at it really quickly. And then but I kind of got bored with it because
Mm.
everybody was playing the violin. And so then I took on viola. And the viola is where I really started to excel. So yeah, I was part of
Wow.
all state,
Oh
all
my
kinds of
goodness.
competitions, youth symphonies. So yeah,
We were talking about Jeff Palkowski earlier before we
yeah,
jumped on here,
yeah.
Mr. Wisconsin. And
He's so
he's
great.
also like in a band
I
as well.
know.
Have you ever played with
I
Jeff
have
in the
not. I
band?
mean, mine's string instrument and he is brass instrument.
I'm thinking that y'all have this little the state line crew or something
Yeah,
y'all get together. I'm
we should
thinking that
play.
needs to like become a band.
I know. Well,
And
we could, during the pandemic, Sarah Noel Wilson, who
uh,
I'm sure you've had the opportunity to
yes,
meet,
absolutely.
she started taking on the accordion. And when the pandemic hit, she had organized this kind of gathering virtually for people to show up with whatever instruments they had. And we played We Will Survive. It was horrible. Like, it was horrible, but it was so much fun. Like, the
Horrible
music
and
was awful,
fantastic.
but
I
people
love
brought
that.
their, instruments to just kind of have this outlet. It was great.
I love that. Oh my goodness. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I saw some videos with Sarah and we had some interaction with she playing the accordion. I was like, oh my
Accordion.
gosh,
Yeah.
it's very
Yeah.
energizing to watch her.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
fantastic. Oh
Oh,
my
she
God.
is. I
There's
know.
so much here. When you start talking about accounting, all of a sudden I start thinking back to my college days. I took accounting one and thinking I was going to be an accountant. Then I did pretty well in it, and I took
Mhm.
accounting two. And after a couple of weeks, I was like, "There is no way
Mhm.
I am going to be an
Right?
accountant." And I had to change lanes quickly. Hey, when you talked about your uncle being a great mentor, I'm
Uh-huh.
curious. Like you've had success.
Yeah.
Were there some mentors along the way that have like helped you get to where you are?
So I sort of early in my career, that first kind of official HR job that I had when I started doing some training and pursuing my certification, I had connected with a person through SHRM, and then I actually took some training that she had organized through her organization, HR Answers. Her name is Deborah Jeffries, and she became kind of an informal mentor for me. Like, we
Hmm.
would meet for coffee, or she would just give me, her thoughts on things. So I don't know that she fully understands the impact that she had on my career. I
Hmm.
had the great fortune of running into her at this last SHRM National, which was fantastic because I now I have many mentors in many different forms. One of which is Steve Brown, which I'm sure for many people is. But it was great to have both my very first mentor and a current mentor together in a picture with me at the same event. It was just wonderful to see them together. But yeah, I mean, there's been lots of folks, kind of along the way. Some have been official mentors, some have been leaders that I've worked with. And I would say more often, I would probably put the people who help shape and guide what I do every day. I would put them in the umbrella of my
Hmm.
peer network. I believe really strongly that the greatest resources that you have are those people that are around you, and it's that
Hmm.
whole iron sharpening iron kind of scenario. So I look to my peers quite a lot to gain insight and feedback and just wisdom.
That's fantastic. I love that. When you said that, I started thinking about something I recently read, and it says, "I am a part of all that I have met."
Mm,
And that was by Tennyson in Ulysses. It was in the Maximum Achievement book by Brian Tracy. But so it's like we meet people and we learn from like everyone that we run into. We learn
yeah.
something from them. And so when you mention that, I love that. I do like to ask this question, especially to high performers like yourself, that you talked about finding your sweet spot, and I always talk
Hmm.
about purpose.
Hmm.
Was there that moment though? I mean, you're doing all these things, you love what you do, you have a great mission. All of these things are all in alignment.
Hmm.
But was there a time when you said, I really like I found it. I found what I love to do.
What's coming up for me is kind of three different
Okay.
things. One
Hmm.
was early in, I want to say it was around that 2012 timeframe. I was working for an organization that was just God, it was so toxic. It was I mean, really questionable leadership, questionable by the sense of like some ethical issues,
Hmm.
backstabbing, gossipy, like just bad, bad culture.
Sure.
And I was exhausted. And I was thinking to myself, like, I don't know that if this is HR, I don't want to do this. I had gone to the national conference a few times since then, and that year I had registered for it. And by the time that the conference came around, I had the attitude of like, okay, I'm going to go. And if I don't walk away re energized for my profession, I'm out. I'm going to change my careers. Well, of course, as you know, you go to these things, you have, you get energized by the people around you and the things that you're learning. And I realized, you know what, it's not the profession that was the problem, it was the organization. So that was
Mm.
one. That was when I knew, like, okay, I
Ah,
think I'm in the
love that.
right field. And then in 2017, I came out of one of the worst, I mean, not one, the worst job I had ever had for a number of reasons I'm not even going to get into. And I was just in a place where I'm like, you know what? I don't want a job. I want to have an impact on people. And I'm not really sure like how to go about that. So of course I'm on the
Mm,
phone with Steve Brown. And one of the things that Steve said to me was, don't underestimate your ability to create your own position within an organization.
mm,
And I thought, wow, like, what does that even mean? You know what
mm,
I mean? But I spent some time thinking about it. And to me, it was like, think about the type of organization that you want to work for, the type of people that you want to work for. What does that culture look like? How could you be a part of shaping it? And are they open to that? So I reached out to a CEO that I admired and looked up to and said, hey, after kind of taking a look at what you do. I know your company is growing. I love your business model and I'd like to come work for you. And he said, send me your resume. So then that started this whole
mm,
conversation around how what I do could benefit his organization. And he created a position for me. And it was sort of this combination of HR,
mm.
but it was also business development, which
Mm.
I thought I was going to like. Turns out, hated it because I hate sales. And business development is sales. Learn that the hard way. And so that it was in that moment. I mean, absolutely love the company. I love the CEO. Shout out to Dr. Clint Flanagan, Nextera Healthcare in Longmont, Colorado. Just such a wonderful team and an amazing business model that he has built for healthcare. Love it. The job itself was not the best alignment for what I wanted to do. And so I knew in that moment HR was the thing. Then when it comes to my sweet spot, fast forward a little bit, end up at Exact Sciences, go through a cancer journey in 2019. And it was during the cancer journey that, you're faced with your own mortality.
Mm,
And it really made me start thinking about the legacy that I wanted to leave
mm,
and the impact that I wanted to have on people. And I didn't want to be known as, oh, well, she's a great hard worker, great performer. It doesn't
mm,
mean anything to me. Like what is meaningful is people.
mm,
And so it really, when I started thinking about, not only for my personal life and making sure that, some people call it balance. I don't think it's balance. It's just life, right? But
mm,
I don't want my life to be my work. My life is my life, and that includes my family and my hobbies and different things. And it also includes the people that are in my work life. And I knew in that moment as I was going through that I can practice HR in a different way, and that's when I knew not only am I in the right profession, not only am I in the right position, not only am I in the right organization, I'm doing the right thing in the way that I'm interacting with people. And so that is my sweet spot.
I'm glad you shared that because I'm sure there's some people listening right now that are going through the times you went through in 2012. I think many of us go through those. I call them
Mhm.
peaks and valleys, right? I've been through them as
Yeah.
well. And I think sometimes you have to look for the good. And the good in this case is that we got to see what not good looks like. We got to see how we
Yeah.
don't how we don't want to operate, but that was good
Yeah.
for us to see that because
Yeah.
now we move forward. Now all of a sudden we got a chance to really shape it to look a different way. And then all of a sudden
Yeah.
you've been around these great people, obviously the CEO, you mentioned, Steve Brown and some other people that have really helped you see that. And so I want people to just I just want them to hear that, hey, it's okay, because
Mm.
if you're going through that tough time right now, there's a reason why you're going through it.
Yeah. And I think being just really thoughtful around, I think this is one of the things that maybe sets myself and my husband, the way we kind of operate in our marriage apart from others, is we are very intentional about what we want our life to be. And every choice, every decision, every move that we make is a step in the direction of what that life is. And, it doesn't mean it's easy.
Mm,
Sometimes you have to sacrifice some things, but if you know what you want
mm,
and you know what you have now is not what you want, you have to take action to change it. And you cannot
mm.
wait for others to change it for you. You have to be really intentional.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I think a lot of times early in our career, we don't really actually know what we want. We just
Yep.
we just want
Yeah.
different, or we just want
Right.
more.
Yeah.
And I've always had the approach of, hey, if you want more, you have to become more. So you just have to
That's right.
keep learning, keep growing,
Yeah.
and go through that. I love all that. Hey, one of the things I do like to ask my guests, this is Life and Leadership Lane. I like to ask them around a question around leadership. Like, so
Okay.
if someone said, hey, Kyra, what's leadership to you? How would you respond to that?
Well, I can tell you that leadership it's not a title. It's not a degree program. To me, it is more of it's a mindset, it's a
Mm,
behavior, it's in how you influence others and helping them to become their potential,
mm,
seeing that in others. I think it's within an organization. Like I think a lot of people, say, well, leadership is, you're leading a team or a program, and people are reporting directly into you. And I would say, management of people or direct reporting relationships is not what leadership is. Leadership has more to do with the relationships and the influence that you have with others, right? Like ultimately, just because you're a leader by title does not make you a leader. We all know that, right? Like the mark of a leader is, are people actually following you, right? So we could probably talk about followership, not just leadership. But really, that's how I see it: is how people are showing up and seeing others for who they truly are, how they're supporting them, coaching, guiding, helping them to become the greatest version of themselves.
yeah, I like that. At the end of the day, I like what you said. You said it's about helping people, right? Get to where they need to go, right?
Yeah.
And then it accomplishes the goals for everybody. I do. One of the things I do enjoy about having guests on the podcast is I start, checking things out. I start doing some research.
Yep.
And of course, I went,
What did you find?
and so you have a website.
I do. Yes.
So, and I'm going to put that in the show notes. But one of the things on your website that I thought was very interesting was you talk a lot about laughter being
Yeah.
important in the workplace. And I thought that
Yeah.
was different because I hadn't really, we all know the importance of that, but I hadn't really seen it like that. Talk about that. Like, how important is that? How do you use that
Ah,
in your work, and
yeah.
your thoughts around that?
Well, I love that you asked this question. I mean, first of all, I laugh a lot. And to me,
You're
I mean,
making me
God,
laugh right now.
life is
It's
so
awesome.
funny. I mean,
Yeah.
really, there's some funny stuff that happens. And I think, it really is a mindset, right? Like you
Yeah.
can, for instance, I in 2020, I was walking out of my garage and I broke my ankle.
Oh.
How do you do that walking out of a garage? Like, breaking my ankle wasn't funny. It freaking hurt.
Mhm.
But it was funny how it happened, and it's like it's those little things where, I always want to share the funny things that happen, if I trip on, and by the way, I'm so klutzy. Fall downstairs, upstairs, walk into glass walls, bump my head on things. I mean, all the time. And I always think to myself, I hope somebody saw that because that was really funny. It's like I want to share that with me. And so, like, when I think about laughter, I mean, first of all, it is a way that we connect with people and it creates community. It also
Mhm.
can be a release. It's very healing. It's good for you. I mean, I wouldn't be able to quote resources and stuff, but if you did some research on the benefits, the health benefits of laughter, you're going to find all kinds of things. And I think, sometimes people just take themselves too seriously and they think, oh, well, I can't have fun while I'm at work. I can't laugh all this. Well, I totally disagree. And I think, when I first started working here, there were a few times where, I'd walk in and people have that sort of reaction like, oh my God, what is HR doing here? And then you start engaging with them. And then they start wondering, like, wait a second, is this HR? Like, is this okay? And I'm like, I'm not doing anything questionable and stuff, but it's like, yeah, I'm joking around, Yes, things are funny. Yes, you can, participate in these things. And one of my favorite quotes is, again, is Steve Brown, and he's used this in his presentations. He says, if you're not messing with your people, trouble, you're not doing good HR. And I love that because I'm like, that's kind of true. It's like practical jokes and, just doing things that bring a little bit of levity and fun into the workplace that kind of break up the seriousness of what we're doing. It's really important.
I was actually reading a book. I mentioned that quote, Brian Tracy book. I was reading a book, and it says, you can measure how you are doing with one simple test, and that's laughter. Like,
Ooh,
because whenever things are not going well, that's usually the one thing that goes away is the
yeah.
laughter. People aren't
Wow.
laughing. And
Yeah,
I love that. I'll have to send that to you,
that's great.
because I just thought, wow, what a great way to measure how things are going. If you see laughter in the workplace, you know what? People are connecting. People like each other. People are, so I love all that. I love all that. Well, you also have you have a blog,
Mm-hmm.
HR Shenanigans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why did you start that? I'm curious. And what's that all about?
I started it because, again, let's go to connections. I remember very distinctly having a conversation. It was 2018. It was during the North Central SHRM um, networking event that was taking place at the SHRM National Conference that year. And I
Okay.
was having, I mean, yes, maybe there were some adult beverages involved. There were a lot of conversations going on. Specifically, I had a conversation with Carlos Escobar. I don't know if you know
I
who
know
that is.
Carlos from great San Antonio.
He pulled me aside, and I don't know if I ever told Carlos this, but Carlos, if you listen to this podcast, I want you to know he pulled me aside and he said, "You have things to share." And I think, you would have an audience with a blog. And I was
Mm.
like, what? I never saw myself as, do I have things to share? I don't know. I mean, is it unique? I mean, aren't all the things already said? I don't know that there's anything new that I can provide, maybe a perspective or whatever. And, that was sort of this narrative I was telling myself. But, it was that conversation that gave me just the nudge to say, you know what, maybe you do have a different perspective. When we
Mm.
talk about the shenanigans and the fun that takes place at work, even in the midst of something serious, maybe that would be a platform. And so that's kind of where it started. There are times where, I'm far more involved in the blogging. It's hard trying to balance all the things that are going on in my life right now. So I don't blog as much as I used to, but that's kind of where it came from.
I wanted to bring that up. And by the way, shout out to Carlos. That is a fantastic story. I met Carlos. I believe he was the president of a SARMA, San Antonio Human Resource
Okay.
Management
Yeah.
Association. And so it reminded me of when I was at a conference one time and I heard Mel Robbins say, a conversation can change your life. And there you
Yeah.
are having this conversation.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, you're starting a blog. I love how you took action on that. But the reason why I wanted to mention this was because, we're all busy. We all have these jobs, but it's those, the what I see is the high performers. They just do the little extras,
Hmm.
right? They integrate things in their everyday. And so you said, you know what, I'm going to write this. Hey, if it helps one person, that's great. But and it's a way to, like you said, I love the word you use, connection. Finding the connection points is so important. I love all of that. I want to ask you this question because I'm giving a couple of presentations coming up around. It's really around changing lanes, and I think a lot of us have changed lanes over the last, well, our whole career, but over the last 5 years in particular. And I wanted to ask you, like, has there been like one or two things that you found that you've changed? You've changed the way you do things, to change the way you operate, that you can like put your finger on and say, you know what, I made that change because I was pushed into making that change because of something. Maybe it was an environment, maybe
Mm-hmm.
it was something. COVID obviously pushed us into a lot of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or was there something that you have changed because you were maybe inspired and you said, you know what, I'm going to change lanes here and do this? Anything come to mind there?
Yeah, oh man, I mean, how do you boil it down? There's so many. Again, I think for me it comes down to intentionality, what
Mm.
it is that but when I think of not just for myself, but when I think of for other people, that kind of, either they feel stagnant or they're, kind of stuck where they are and they're not really sure what's next. One of the first things I say is, what do you want?
Mm,
And sometimes I don't know that people have been asked what do they want. And sometimes they're stuck under an expectation of others that others have imposed on them. For instance, parental expectations. I want you
mhm,
to be a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever. And they want to go be a musician or they want to do something different that maybe their family's not going to approve of, right? And so they've made choices that kind of feel like a burden to them, because it's not true to who they are. And so when I ask the question, what is it that you want? Who
mm,
do you want to be? What kind of impact do you want? Never mind titles, organizations, job, things. Like, just think about the things that bring you energy every day. I put them in
mm,
two categories. One is energy giver, one is energy sucker.
mm,
So, like, what are those energy givers? The things that you wake up and before your alarm goes off because you're so excited to do whatever that is, right? What are those things, that just, man, you can't wait to do? Doesn't feel like work. It's just something that really brings you fulfillment. The energy suckers are obviously the exact opposite of that. It's the things that you're like, oh, I don't want to do this. You hit snooze 15 times because, that's what's your day is, composed of. You procrastinate, you do something for 5 minutes and then you're looking for any possible excuse to not do it anymore. Those are the energy suckers. And I think being really honest with yourself about
mm,
what those things are, in line then with what it is that you want, who
mm.
you want to be, what you want to become. I think it can paint a different picture for you about, okay, now that I have this in mind, what actions do I need to take to move closer to whatever that goal is?
That's fantastic. I love all of that. I love I circle the word here, intentional.
Mm,
I think at the end of the day, that's probably what I've learned more than anything. That's probably the lane change I've made is I want to be intentional in everything that I do. I mean, time is short, right? We only have so
yeah,
much time in the day.
yeah,
And I want it to all revolve around people. Because
exactly.
I'm, you just talked about, energy givers and energy suckers. I am just energized from being around great people
Yeah,
that the givers, like yourself.
yeah.
And so I love that. Oh my goodness. I love that. This is fantastic. I'm telling you, I can take this topic right here and we can go a long time. But I do want to ask you this before I go to my next question. And that is there's people listening right now. They're like, oh man, Kyra, she's sounds like she's in a good place. She's really worked hard to get to where she's at.
Yeah,
What and you love leadership development. I would
yeah.
love for you maybe to give, I don't know, maybe give some tips to someone listening right now that says, you know what, I want to continue to progress in my career.
Hmm.
What is something you've done or that you teach others to do
Hmm.
that will help them continue to progress in their career?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, kind of taking what we just talked about before, and that is what is it that you want, and who do you want to become? What are
Mm,
those energy givers, energy suckers? That is all part of that really sort of self-reflection process. And then I think also when you start thinking about where is it that you want to go, are you looking for a lateral move? Are you looking for a vertical move, vertical growth, continuing whatever that path looks like? You have to consider your gaps. You have
mm,
to consider, well, there may be things that you don't know, or
mm,
you think you know, but you don't know, or but you're not very skilled at, right? And
mm,
so that could be, I mean, think about where are your inputs coming from? What feedback have you heard? Who do you trust that could give you some feedback and insights? Even taking assessments that can provide you some insights about who you are, why you are the way you are, the way you think. I'm thinking like Strength Finders DISC,
mm,
Hogan Insights. I mean, all of those different assessments that I think can give you some perspective about who you are that, can help kind of align your goal setting process. So then once you have all those inputs, I mean, to me, then it's like, okay, well, now let's talk about your development plan.
mm,
What are you going to do? So it's not enough to say, well, I want to be developed, or I want to continue developing. Okay, great. What are you going to do? You know what I mean? Like, first of all, you are in the driver's seat of your career. You are. Your parents are not. Your spouse is not, your organization isn't, your manager, your boss is not, you are in the driver's seat of your career. And so you have to create that priority around that. If that is important to you, it's just like they say with finances and other things. Like you can look at somebody's checkbook, if that's even a thing anymore, bank account, maybe we'll just look at a bank account. I'm dating myself. You can look at somebody's bank account and you can see the things that they value, right, by
Yeah.
how they spend their money. And so to me, it's the same thing with development is, if you value your development, you will prioritize it. And so again, it's a matter of intentionally scheduling this. One of the things that I do that I've found really valuable is blocking time on my calendar, and I honor that time. And if somebody needs, well, I need a meeting with you really urgently. Okay, well, let's talk about what urgent is. Is this something that I would be willing to give up this time for? Because it is actually urgent. And, is that something that I'm willing to make them? Or I go in the driver's seat and say, you know what, that time I'm not available, but here's where I can be available. And 99% of the time, people would be like, yep, that's acceptable, right? Like you are allowing others to impose themselves on you and your schedule, and then you're suffering as a result of that. So you have to be intentional about your time, your calendar, where you're spending your time. When you say, well, I don't have time for that. Well, how much time are you sitting in front of the video game playing Call of Duty, or, whatever the case is? I mean, and I say that because I play Call of Duty, but, but so it's really one of those things, again, if it's important to you, you will find the time to do it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I was actually thinking acronym I heard when we talk about ACT. It's about, action, and she changes things, right? You have to take action once you decide all of those things. I wrote a blog one time when you mentioned the word gaps. I wrote a blog one time around gaps. Whenever people get stuck, I always talk about you got to go look at your gaps, but it was really an acronym for number one. G stands for goals. Do you have goals? A lot of times we're stuck because we don't have goals. The A is about alignment. Are you in alignment with what you're doing? Like sometimes we're working nights, but yet, not seeing our kids or whatever the case may be. P is all around purpose, and S is around service, and so you can always go back to those as well. But I love all of that, but it really starts with, what do you want to do and who do you want to be? And just like you said. And so I love that. I guarantee you there are people right now. I've got 2 pages of notes here, Kyra, and there are people taking notes right now and learning from this. So I appreciate you sharing this. Hey, I do have one question before we shift to it's time to accelerate. And that is around advice. You've given a lot of great advice today. But I do like to ask this question. Was there ever any advice that was given to you? It was just so good. You've just found yourself sharing that over the years.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's little nuggets here and there. I already shared a couple from Steve Brown, but others that I've heard, kind of early in my career and kind of continue, and I pass this on to others. Don't go this alone. It takes a village. It takes a community. Learn from others. Be true to who you are. You've got to free yourself from the expectations of others. I will tell you, I lived a lot of my life, trying to meet the expectation of something. And again, a lot of this stuff was just sort of narratives I was telling myself, but it wasn't until I was like, you know what, I'm done with that. I'm going to pursue the things that are important to me. And I don't mean that in a selfish way. I mean that you talk about alignment, like, is it in alignment with your value system, right? Does it matter? Does it bring you purpose? Does it bring you joy and fulfillment and satisfaction? And, what the expectations of others are not your burden to bear, so you've got to free yourself from that. And then another one is, get comfortable with giving meaningful and critical feedback. Feedback is not conflict. It is not conflict. It is a gift. So be comfortable. I always tell people, if you have feedback to give, it is your responsibility to give it. Right. So then it's a thought process of how can you give feedback, particularly if it is critical, negative, whatever you want to call it, constructive. How can you give it in a way that it will be received with the intention that you are meaning? So those are some of the pieces of advice I have. Don't do it alone. Learn from others, free yourself from the expectations, get comfortable with providing feedback.
I love that. That is all gold. I will tell you, I have a love-hate relationship with feedback. I love it, but I hate it, and I love it because I know I'm going to grow from it.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about. It's about just
Yeah.
being open,
Yep.
right, to
Yep.
that. This has been so much fun. I appreciate you sharing all of this. I want to shift to it's time to accelerate. I'm going to ask you some fun questions.
Okay.
I am curious, would you rather read a book or listen to an Audible or a podcast?
I mean, it depends if it's on a
Yeah.
commute or a road trip podcast. If
Hmm,
it's like relaxing and just I'm all about the book. I want to touch it and read
love
it
it.
and feel it. So yeah, kind of both, but it just depends on the environment.
Love it. When you mentioned the drive just now, it made me think about it. I do want to ask you one thing. You do some volunteering as well. I know that recently
Yeah.
I saw you as part of the Smile team
Yep.
in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Volunteering, what's that? I don't know. What's that done for you in your career? And I want people to hear, because there's probably some people listening right now that maybe they volunteer, but maybe you can help validate that. Hey, you know what? Keep doing it because it matters. Or maybe there's somebody
Mm,
listening that they're thinking about volunteering. What's it
yeah.
done for you?
So volunteering in the HR world, to me, it's all about connections and people. What we are the people function,
Mm,
in HR, and we have to give back to our people. This is hard.
mm,
HR can be really hard,
right.
and if that peer-to-peer connection, giving back to the profession, being a part of, helping it become bigger and better than what it is. We shouldn't be like people shouldn't have that response when HR comes in, like, yeah, what's HR doing here? You know what I mean? Like, that's what are we doing wrong that people are
Mm,
responding in that way? You know what I mean? So there's that piece of it, which is really about, giving back to the profession. And I do it because I mean, I first of all, I love what I do and I love people. So why not, volunteer to give back? And I'm going to do the social media stuff anyway. And so, whether I'm on an influencer team or a smile team or something like that, I mean, I love that I've been a part of it. It's a great honor to do that. I would do it anyway.
yeah.
Volunteering just in general. I mean, there's a lot of data that, supports this as well, is that when you volunteer your time, which is a gift, time is a gift
Mm,
to give to other people. And whether that is through your profession, through an association, through a nonprofit, any number of ways, it helps you get out of yourself and you have a bigger perspective of the
mm,
world,
yeah.
and that to me, I think is just incredibly purposeful and meaningful.
That's so good. That's so good. I appreciate you. And I appreciate you volunteering and doing the work you're doing. I do want to ask you this. I always talk about great leaders are grateful leaders. What are you grateful
Yeah.
for?
Oh my gosh. All of it. I'm grateful for all of it every day. I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for an incredible marriage, my husband, my children, the incredible relationships that I've built in the HR community, for people in my inner circle that allow me to be vulnerable, which is
Mm,
not natural to me at all. But, having some close people that have just really kind of allowed that to happen naturally has been really, it's been a lot of growth for me. I'm grateful for my career, the phenomenal leaders that I get to be a part of, this amazing organization that I get to work for every day. Grateful for bees and gardens and sunsets and wine and, I'm grateful for you. Just I'm grateful for all of it.
I love that. I love how you threw wine in there with the bees and the that's fantastic. Well, I'm grateful for you coming on today. This is
Thank you.
fantastic. Hey, I want to ask you one final question, and the question is probably my favorite question. That's Kyra, 10 years older, and she's around the
Oh,
corner and
yeah.
she's knocking at your door,
Yeah.
and you're going to go answer that door. What's she going to tell you?
Enjoy your retirement.
Mm.
I mean, for real, like 10 years. That's my goal. I'm going to retire in 10 years and I think, enjoy the retirement, but I think it would also be, continue to give.
Mm.
Don't, when even if now, even if I don't retire, you know what I mean? Don't let it be a source of bitterness. Don't give it an excuse to be alone or whatever. You can still work your purpose as you get older, and the wisdom that you provide, I think continue to provide that.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
don't ever think you're going to retire, Kyra. You are always going to be doing great things. You may be
you.
doing something different, but you're going to be doing great things for a long time. I appreciate
Thanks.
you so much for coming on the show. Hey, if somebody heard something you shared today,
Yeah.
and I don't know, maybe they want to follow you or connect with you, what's the best way for them to connect?
So they can, I'm on LinkedIn, Kyra Matkovich. I'm literally the only Kyra Matkovich on LinkedIn. So you can't, you can't miss me. Twitter or X, I guess is what's called Threads, Instagram. I'm Kyra Matkovich HR. HRShenanigans.com is my website and blog, and you can reach out to me there. So yeah, I mean, any number of ways. And if you do decide to connect with me and just shoot me a note that you heard the podcast
Hmm.
and maybe something that resonated with you, and if there's anything that I can do to support people in their kind of career goals or development process, I'm very happy to do so.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I always say that too. Yeah, it let her know that you heard her on the podcast. It makes that connection so
Yeah.
much better from the start. And I'll put the link in the show notes so you can check out HR Shenanigans and all things Kyra. You're gonna just you're gonna be inspired by just the work she's doing. And so, Kyra, I appreciate you so much for coming on the show, sharing
Thank
your
you.
wisdom, your perspective, and I can't wait to share this.
Oh man, thank you so much for having me, Bruce. This has just been a great honor. I admire you so much, and I'm just really humbled that you asked me to be a part of this. Thank you.
Awesome. I can't wait to share it. Okay, I'll talk to you later, Kyra.
Thanks.